On June 6, the country of Barbados in the Caribbean, English speaking Caribbean, joined the list of nations who registered their protests against the brutal slaying of George Floyd in the United States of America. Now, it was very good to see another Black country joining their voice to the list of nations, but I must tell you from the onset that the protests in Barbados did have a number of problems. For example, the protest, which was a protest against the use of state violence in the form of the police, that almost ended up being exactly what happened here in Barbados, as police turned up and eventually withdrew the permit that had been given to the organization that had planned the march. And of course, even though I felt it was good that Barbados had joined the list of nations with a march, it was a bittersweet experience for the very simple reason that the government of Barbados basically gave permission for the march against the backdrop of the COVID-19 emergency regulations that had been given. And even though permission was given for the march, there was a caveat entered into the permission, and that was that the organizers of the march could only include 10 people in the march, which to me was kind of ridiculous because Barbados is a Black country, and like most Black countries, you have a number Black conscious organizations in Barbados. You have groups like the Clement Payne Center, the Rastafarian community, you have Nuwabians in Barbados, you have the Spiritual Baptists, which has a very Afrocentric approach to religion. You have the Israel Level Foundation, and of course, there are individuals like myself who have a very keen interest on affairs taking place which affect Black people all over the world. So when the government gave the organizing group permission to hold the march, but only stipulated that there could be 10 people, that was going to be a problem from the get-go. And so when we arrived by the American Embassy on June the 6th, which was last Saturday, already we could see that there was going to be a problem because there were already more than 10 people gathered. However, the organizers came and they started addressing the group, and immediately it was observed that there were going to be problems. There was some shouting, a bit of pushing and shoving, and there was even an attempt to arrest the main spokesman for the organizers, who was very defiant in telling the police he would not be moved and they would have to take him away. Well, eventually the police changed tactics, and instead of dealing with the organizers, the police then addressed the crowd, informing the crowd that due to the fact that permission had only been granted for 10 people to attend the march, that the permit had been withdrawn and that the people assembled could now be classified as an illegal assembly and could be treated as such by the law. And so the Barbados Floyd George protest march basically ended that way with some of the organizers. They still persisted in taking a knee, but it was colored by the fact that the authorities in Barbados attempted to stifle the protesters and stifle Barbadians from coming out to show their solidarity with our brethren in North America. I found the occurrence in Barbados to have been very distasteful for the very simple fact that We know that there are a whole number of white majority nations. Just today, I was hearing that in places like Japan, in Tokyo, and in Thailand, you had George Floyd protest marches. You had marches in Ireland. You had marches in Norway, in Sweden, in Australia, in Denmark. These are either white or non-black countries, but yet they were willing to uh, do away with their COVID-19 restrictions to allow for mass participation in these marches in these white and Asian majority countries. So to me, it was very unfortunate that Barbados, a black country, we did not see the value in relaxing our COVID-19 restrictions and allowing the Barbadian public to make a decision as to whether they wanted to go out. And knowing Barbadians, I know that Barbadians would have gone out if the police had insisted that we stood the 6 feet apart and wear masks. Barbadians would have complied with the COVID-19 regulations, and we could have had a successful march like countries all over the world, but that was not to be. The other interesting thing I would like to comment on is the fact that Barbados, unlike most of its neighbors, when most people were closing their ports to international travelers, Barbados kept its ports open, especially the seaport and, of course, the airport. And Barbados was a hive of activity where stranded cruise line passengers came through the port in Bridgetown, boarded buses, and they were escorted to the airport in Barbados, where they were then able to take flights out to Europe and the US. And of course, many people criticize the government of Barbados for doing this, making the point that by doing that, they were exposing Barbados to a greater risk with respect to COVID-19. But I defended the Barbados government on the grounds that even in a pandemic, we still have to maintain a certain level of humanity. We can't use a pandemic as an excuse not to be good global citizens, not to help out people who are stranded and who are in need of humanitarian assistance. And Barbados did reach out and extend this kind of assistance to these European and American and others who had been stranded on cruise liners in the Caribbean. Now, I mentioned that to make the point that if the government of Barbados was willing to expose Barbados to a certain level of risk to help Caucasians and others who were stranded so they could get back home, I really felt that the government of Barbados dropped the ball badly by not waiving the COVID-19 restrictions and allowing Black Barbadians to come out in their numbers and show their solidarity with what has been happening in North America. To me, it was not the finest moment for Barbados. It was not the finest moment for the Caribbean. I'm however hopeful that Barbados will formally uh, relax some of the restrictions that we currently have, and that the organizers of this march or even other groups of people, I'm very elated. Someone sent me a video today showing a church organization in the US who had a separate march. And I think that religious organizations who should be at the forefront of the quest for social justice need to get involved in these marches. So I'm hoping that the government of Barbados and indeed the public of Barbados would see the need to correct the mistake that we made and to lend our voice to showing solidarity to what is happening in North America, this time in a very better and complete way where all Barbadians would get a chance to exercise their freedom and their right to come out and say no to racial discrimination, as well as to say no to police brutality, not only in North America, but in Barbados, the Caribbean, in Africa, and the rest of the world. So we wait now to see what the authorities in Barbados will do in this matter.